What's up? Andrew Farabee here, founder of Knowledge for Men. And in today's episode, we'll be breaking down an interview with a member of our coaching staff, Peter Wright, who just recently went through a men's retreat. So we're going to be breaking down some of the biggest lessons that he got from that experience and sharing them with you guys here today. If you're interested in learning more about the coaching work that we do at Knowledge for Men, then visit kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. Enjoy today's episode.
We stop growing emotionally at such a young age. All of those pressures come in, all of the external influences, and what it means, air quotes here, to be a man. And I, honest to God, man, up until probably about 2 years ago, the way I describe it is I had two emotions. I was either shitty or awesome. That's the extent of my emotional awareness, because I hadn't grown. And if I felt shitty, then the only mission was to go out and feel good. And so continuing that journey of diving deeper. And I know on the last episode, we talked about, my super journal. And that's one of the key ingredients in there, was putting in those repetitions on a daily basis of having all the feelings and emotions listed out and just highlighting on a daily basis which ones I felt that day. It was awkward. It was clunky, just like anything when you start. I thought that it was ridiculous at the time, struggling, fumbling through it. But, over the course of putting in those repetitions for going on almost a couple of years, being able to identify that almost in real time, real space. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling overwhelmed, whatever that is, and being able to communicate and share that.
How would this, do you think, impact your relationships?
Massively, Andrew. So one of the biggest pieces, and I know with my partner, empathy is very important to her. And I think that's true for all women. I think that's true for all deep connection, either an intimate relationship, whether it's a business relationship, negotiation, a social relationship with your parents. Without having that understanding for yourself, like I said, I'm still very much on that journey, still growing more into that space. You can't truly step into their shoes. So I think for all men, for myself included, how we approach it is you just see the problem. And it's like, oh, well, you just got to do this. That's not, and especially in an intimate relationship, that's not what they're looking for. That's not what your partner's looking for. That's not what your girlfriend or your wife is looking for. It's to acknowledge what they're telling you, validate it, and empathize with it. That must be really blank. You must feel so blank.
When you do that, it feels like allies on the same team. It's easy for, especially I think, a man with an ego to want to solve, because it's like, oh, this is my opportunity to shine. This is where I can share my strengths of solving problems and fixing things, when it ignores the emotional world of your partner, which is in many ways the world. But you invalidate the partner, therefore you actually create distance.
One of the big pieces there as well is we want to we're logicizing beings as men. So I remember when first hearing the concept of, oh, women don't want you to problem solve for them. And it's like, well, what do I say then? What fills that gap?
What do I do? Problem solve yet.
That's all it is just creating that space to allow them to share, to feel heard, and to truly listen. And I think that's a key piece as well, Andrew, is when you're actively listening, and you know this, I know this, because my brain still wants to go there quite often. Oh, you should just do that. You should just do this. The active listening's gone at that point. Whereas when you put yourself into that realm of empathizing, you're really hanging on to their every word. I think it's one of the best pieces that I've learned along my journey, to be there, be present in that conversation. She can solve her own problems, right? I'm here to support, I'm here to listen, provide advice when solicited. That's been a big lesson learned as well. Would you like my advice? Huge. Opposed to just giving it.
It would have a huge impact on relationships, is what we're getting at. Now, back to this island retreat. You're getting your carpool to go to the camp.
And that was an absolute blast. I mean, it was completely unknown up until about 2 hours beforehand, before I knew that I had to leave the town and make this hour-long drive to where the retreat was located. And I could tell the man who was one of the students in the program, one of the members there, I was on the phone with him briefly. I could tell he was a little bit flustered. He's trying to figure things out. He had just flown in as well, had this contact to pick up this vehicle. And then they were struggling to find me. Google Maps was all off. And then this beat up Suburban shows up, missing back window. Yeah. Jump into it with these three other men right around my age, kind of early to mid 30s. I didn't know the age or caliber or the level of growth and development. I loved the connections built right there in that vehicle on the drive out, grabbing tacos, grabbing some food, and making the drive across the island to make it to this retreat. Instantly being around other men who had done a lot of personal growth and development themselves. The ability to get into those deeper conversations. What's your intention coming here? Why did you show up for this? What journey are you on?
What were some of the things that you heard?
One man, he does counseling, right? And has done a lot of inner work with himself, very passionate about what he does with his clients, with his team, but is still feeling a little bit stuck and stagnant. One of the other men, he just had just an incredible energy about him, and not somebody that I would have ever pictured myself kind of connecting with.
Why is that?
To be blunt, he just seemed kind of hippie-ish to me. And he's just shared some really incredible journeys that he's been on, the type of work that he's in, the type of inner work that he's done, the spiritual connection that he has, where he's finding opportunities in a lot of really great adventures to feel that connection with the land, with those around him.
It's interesting when you put yourself in a group of new men that you've never met, but you can tell, or through the early conversations, you can tell that they're also on a journey of some sort. And because of that, even though they come from different parts of the world, you can connect on that very quickly with other men.
I mean, this is the first men's, like strictly men's retreat that I've been to live in person. And it was so refreshing, man. There's a singular purpose, mission that every single man going to this retreat, every single staff member had in common. There was a common goal amongst every single man there. And that was their growth and development, men's work. And that's the binding right there. 44 initiates, let's call ourselves. And about 30 staff, all men as well. So this is far bigger than what I had envisioned, right? I'm coming into this thinking like, oh yeah, there'll be 8, 10, 12, a couple facilitators. Like we're going to be 15 or less. And now we're up into like the 70, 75 count.
Yeah, that's an interesting ratio though. 30 staff.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit of staff. I would say that the event that I attended was in that range as well, between like maybe 60 and 75 guys, including the staff too. And there was quite a bit of staff.
And it was incredible because, there's, and I've got such a deep appreciation, coming from the wildfire realm, the amount of logistics involved in something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably about 20 of those men were engaged with us very directly. And probably about 10 to 15 that were just operating in the background consistently to keep things operating smoothly. We go through a sequence, different checkpoints along the way, walking into where we're camping out. Certain men along the way, you just stand in front of them and just stare at them. They would just stare at you and just maintaining gaze.
What do you think the point of that was? Are you toe to toe or?
Fairly close, yeah. What they are trying to reenact are those cultural practices that have been lost on us, where men in kind of tribal communities would come in, take the young boys away from their mothers, away from the feminine, away from that safety and comfort, and take them out on an excursion or on a ritual of some sort to initiate them into manhood. And so part of it was just bringing in that hard and soft at the same time aspects of masculinity, of welcoming everybody in, all of the initiates in, as essentially the view was as boys or young men, and to ascend them to manhood, to adulthood.
What's interesting here, though, is that everyone already is a grown man doing this.
You've seen it. I'm sure that every man listening to this, I know that our clients have seen this as well, of, you know, that proverbial, a boy trapped in a man's body. Just because you have the physical characteristics of being a man doesn't mean that you have the mental, the emotional, the spiritual ability to be a man.
So this is lost.
Yeah, for sure. And so many of us grew up without strong male role models in our lives. Very common theme that came out through this entire retreat, through this entire weekend. Pieces that I've still held on to this day. And I'll share some of my lessons learned that I pulled out of this experience. But going back to it, coming to like kind of these different checkpoints along the way, it was really fascinating, Andrew, because my ability to be comfortable in that space, I could imagine myself 3-4 years ago, 10 years ago, and a lot of men today being very uncomfortable holding that gaze with another man at such close proximity, your faces only being a foot or two apart. The intimidation factor that would come in. And I loved it because I know that part of it is for that intimidation, but some of the older men, the ones that I would consider the elders, the warmth of their eyes, the warmth of the wrinkles on their skin, and you could just see the joy behind their eyes of what they were doing. And it wasn't intimidating to me. It was just like a really surreal, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking of it again. Just such surreal moments with certain ones of some of those men that were those elders, to be able to look in their eyes and just wonder, like, what do you have to teach me? What's your story? What have you seen? What have you done in your life?
What's also interesting here is that no one has any idea about occupation or accolades or anything, that every man is stripped down going into this. We don't know. So there's no preconceptions about status, just going based off presence. And so we could even think, how are others looking, just for the audience to question themselves, is how do others, you're saying, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this man's warmth, and you feel almost connected to the older men in this exercise. But how might others view you, the listener, in your presence? That's what it made me think is, I wonder how my presence is being felt without having to share anything about myself or based upon what I'm wearing or based on how I look, but how is, just by looking at my face, how does that make others feel? Is it that warmth that seems like you're almost drawn to this person, or is it that you could be pushing people away?
Right. Because the way that I saw it in that exact example that you used there is, some of these men were trying to intimidate me. They were trying to put on that facade but the energy that they were projecting, the look in their eyes, the warmth of it, it wasn't intimidating. Whereas on the flip side, using that exact example there, and for the audience to look at, is, are you trying to put on that warmth, but your energy that you're projecting is resentful, cold, negative, pessimistic? Are you conveying that through your energy, through your eyes?
So they're out of alignment. You want to connect, but you're putting off something that is pushing others away.
Yeah, wearing a mask of what you think other people want you to be. And the pain's coming through that. Whereas I saw some of these men as trying to wear the mask of being cold, of being hard. And I could see right through it. Your eyes don't say that. Looking at you in the eyes, I can see your soul. I can see the warmth that you project. So continuing down the line, yeah, then we were stripped of our belongings. Phones are taken, no reading materials, no journals, nothing. Just the bare necessities are given back to me in my sleeping bag with my clothing. That's all I had. Then my ego came into play. The man doing the shakedown on me, I didn't like him. And it was a lesson learned for myself. The very first lesson learned coming out of this experience is like, okay, I've got a problem with authority.
You didn't like him, or you didn't like what he was doing?
The trigger was I didn't like what he was doing. I didn't like his attitude or demeanor towards me, which made me not like him. That was the ego right there in that present moment. And then coming out of it, coming through the weekend, I was like, right, you're playing a role. You're doing this because it's part of the journey. It's part of this program. You're here to help me. You're here to serve me. I'm here to learn from you.
Right there, you're in this exercise, so you're in this retreat, so you're looking for these lessons, you're looking for takeaways. Yeah. But for all guys listening, it's like when you encounter people like that, where someone does something that you don't like, or the energy they're giving off is negative, but you're finding the lesson within it. You said this person's here to serve me, and little things like this guy. Earlier on my drive back from the gym, this guy cut me off. Of course, my initial gut reaction was, curse at this guy. But, just not like I'm not like chasing him or anything, but I'm just like, oh, whatever. Maybe this guy's in a rush. Like I've been in a rush before. All good. That's a very small example, but, you can take it even bigger with relationships or exes or bosses. Thinking of a person who is causing pain, but this person is serving you. So you lose your stuff.
And I'll tell you straight up, food security for me is a big thing. Like I'm a very active guy. I eat a lot of food. So I'd stocked up on some bars and everything like that. I could have snacks. Yeah, gone. And for the next couple of days, just as a snapshot to that is, I consume probably around 3,500 calories a day. And we were given probably around 650. And the entire principle there, and I loved it. I didn't love it initially. I'll admit that, is you're going to be given what you need, not what you want. We had food, we had shelter, we had our sleeping bags, we had what we needed. We got into some exercises, a lot of the same principles of how we coach men as well.
Such as what?
Breaking them down. So we got broken down. Getting real, raw, honest, doing that inner reflection, stop lying to ourselves, look at the different pieces that are showing up in our lives, look how you're showing up. Let's get this broad level scale of looking at the entire world, how men are showing up in the world as shadow versions of themselves. This relates over in our culture as what you would call that toxic masculinity, only focusing on the pieces of being a man that cause destruction, wars, burning of the earth, essentially, destroying relationships, destroying self.
Yeah. Toxic masculinity. I think one way to we hear it throwing around, but just one way is like it's just fear based. It's coming from fear based, survival based. That's coming from a lower level
Yeah.
of thinking and mindset versus creation based or leadership based, bringing people together, win win. That is also masculinity, seeking win win outcomes.
And just looking inward, they do the piece where they're bringing the awareness, us to do that in a reflection of where we're showing up. We broke off into, because there's 44 men, so we broke into 5 groups. And we each got up in our group to state essentially our intentions of what we were looking to gain out of the weekend. And as I mentioned, I already had done some journaling on that. The 2 that were for me, we talked about the emotional piece. The other piece for me was the spiritual piece, having a deeper spiritual connection. I am not a religious person. I believe in the work that I do here. I believe that it serves a higher purpose, a higher impact than just myself. That is absolutely a piece that I have looked at as being part of spiritual. And I think this lends in really well to that emotional side as well, but feeling that spiritual connection with others, feeling that spiritual connection with the land, with the resources, with the sky, everything around me. Just in the seeking of being more present. So if you could call the goal to be more present, those spiritual and emotional pieces are the key focuses for me right now as the objectives to work towards achieving that. Following breaking off into our groups, and we then all rejoined and went through a really powerful exercise of, again, just staring into another man's eyes and actually projecting onto them our thoughts about them, what considerations we had about them.
This time you're actually sharing what you think about this person. It's not just eye gazing. What were some of the things that you heard about yourself?
Apparently I come off as a family man because everyone seemed to think I had 2 kids. I do not. I've got 2 dogs. That I enjoy physical fitness. I'm in a relationship, which is true. I'm very close with my parents, which is not particularly true. What I found interesting there as well, Andrew, was that I didn't necessarily have anyone project anything negative onto me.
Were people scared to do that?
I think so, because we rotated partners. So I went through about 4 rounds of this.
Mm-hmm. So it was mostly positive. Like we're sort of saying positive qualities about each other, which I'm sure some people likely felt some negative qualities, but didn't go there.
And the intention of the practice of this exercise was to be honest.
Mm.
So I did project my honest projections onto a few men. I remember specifically saying to one man, I project onto you that I touched on all kind of those positive aspects about his family life, what I assume, and fun and joy. But I projected onto him. There was just something that I could see in his face, see in his eyes, that I projected onto him, that he actually has quite a bit of pain internally, and he covers it up with the beautiful smile, with his eyes, with his face. But he's in pain because he's not sharing his truth somewhere in his life. And my projection was that it was in his relationship. And after the exercise wrapped up, he talked to me and he said that I hit spot on.
I think many men listening would relate with that too.
Yeah.
If most people weren't sharing the truth and sharing positive qualities that we likely are aware of, or some of them aren't even true, they're saying that you're a family man. But I think what they're communicating is that you're coming off across as like fatherly and warm and caring. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I hear in fatherly. But you gave that guy, you gave him value by sharing the truth and by taking a risk.
I think so, man. And the purpose of the exercise, although the intent was for men to share truth, I can see the underlying meaning there for you to share your truth with another man while sitting down directly in front of them, knee to knee, essentially, in that uncomfortable space. for a lot of men. And for the other person to receive it and recognize that those judgments, those projections, that's all they are. To hear the truth, sure, and to hear how other people view them. But the things that there's going to be, without ever having met this person, without there being any context, without knowing their history, their background, their name, for that matter, that you can take that and you're still alive. You're all right. And I could sense that some men withheld that truth, what they were truly thinking, which is so common in the fear of hurting somebody's feelings.
And wanting to be liked.
Yes.
If I hurt this person's feelings, then this person may not like me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so common to, I mean, it's not about being an asshole by any means, going out and intentionally criticizing or trying to hurt somebody's feelings, but sharing the truth. And it's that I project onto you XYZ. And then knowing that you gotta, you talked about I'm wanting to be liked. I mean, the timing of this exercise couldn't be more perfect because you got to spend the next 48 hours sleeping next to these people, these other men.
Right. I was on a different type of event, but my flight was delayed. So I arrived late. When we're doing a circle where men were sharing their truth, one guy actually shared that I want him to leave me because I had arrived late. And I apparently had missed some very vulnerable exercises. And so my presence, having missed that, likely made this man feel perhaps like I wasn't a part of the group, or that I was unsafe. And that was his truth, was everyone was being vulnerable, mostly about themselves. But this man's truth was to actually, for me to leave. I would want this man to leave, is what he requested. And I saw everyone kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
And
that's a polarizing comment in a group of brand new people.
Very polarizing. And what was interesting was that throughout that weekend, we became the closest. And we drove together back to the airport. Yeah. And like during lunches, we were like the best guy. And but within that truth, we uncovered that we were there for the same exact reason. At that time, this was many years ago. The point that I'm getting at is he spoke his truth in a very big way. No one said anything like that. And it sparked a connection that was very strong during the event and after, as we stayed in touch.
Yeah, man. Because you probably respected him for that.
I probably would have felt the same. I don't know that I would have said that, but perhaps other people were thinking that too. And I felt very excluded because I thought maybe everyone is feeling this way. And I was like, oh, well, and I was kind of stuttering, explaining myself away. Like the plane was delayed and the staff actually came in and vouched for it. They like looked it up and everything. But the power of the truth it is the power of a man's word.
Yeah. Super powerful. I love that. And kudos to that man for speaking up and sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I still remember that energy.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I can hear the silence and the awkward looks that would have happened in that group. So moving on, all 9 of us were to stand up, and without saying a word, we were to select one leader for the group. And you just sat down when you determined that you weren't going to be the leader until there was only one man standing. Of having to do the ego check for myself as well. I've been in leadership roles forever. So you can, where I went to. So
yeah,
just to share that experience, 9 of us standing up, basically go immediately, 5 sat down. So there's 4 of us remaining. I'm still standing.
So you remain standing if you believe you should be the leader. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Yes, correct. And I would challenge the audience. What would you do?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you can be sitting there listening to this right now, saying, oh, I'd stay standing, put yourself in that situation. Because I think every man's ego will tell them that they would stay standing until you are actually there doing it.
So how does it continue? Do you just remain standing? Is it a timer, or
No timer.
you just sit down after
You determine that you're not going to be the leader. Yeah. So there's 4 of us standing, no words being spoken. We're just staring at each other, looking at each other, analyzing one another. One more man goes down. So there's 3 of us remaining. I'm still standing. We still have no context behind each other. We haven't had formal introductions. We don't know each other at this point. The other man that just projected that confidence, that leadership, he sat down. It was myself and one other guy. And he and I are looking at each other. And I'll tell you, Andrew, that's where I had to do a hard ego check. I'm 15 years now. I've been in leadership positions. I get to those very quickly, but I could see it in his face. He needs something here more than I do. He needs this leadership position more than I do. And he and I were looking at each other for probably about a solid minute, and I chose to sit.
How did that feel for you?
Really good. Because I could see in him the tension release in his body. And over the weekend, got a deeper dive with him about why he was there and the importance of having that. He needed that confidence. He needed that peace. Whether that's driving from his ego, whether that's driving from his truth, whether it's a mix of both. But I was willing to surrender to that and recognize that I can still be a leader in this group by showing up, playing fully, demonstrating through my actions that at the end of the day, it doesn't come down to title. I think that tension generated for about that 60 seconds of us looking at each other needed to be there. You know, you're talking about the experience of this other man stepping up and saying, you know, and meanwhile, there's 7 other guys sitting around us, like looking at this awkward silence, not speaking, right? So you're very much on the stage there.
There was 5 other groups, so this every group is doing this at the same time and
simultaneously.
You said something really good though, in that I can lead through my actions, that I don't need the title, but I could see myself in there doing basically the same as you were doing. Like, I'm a leader in my life. I've been a leader for many years, and I'm going to be a leader here. But sometimes taking that step back and being an active contributor and an active member, you can gain so much from that as well. Looking at like, okay, well, what am I here for, and what experience do I want, and do I need to be in this position in order to get that experience, or is this just an ego play and I feel that I need to win?
Yeah.
But winning may not be the title. Winning may be just playing hard as a contributor of the team.
Absolutely, Andrew. And the self-talk that goes on in that moment, right? Of that conversation of ego, like, oh, you're not going to beat me. Like, I'm more qualified than you. How am I supposed to know that I'm more qualified? No context of this man's background, what he does for a living, what his experiences are. Having that self-talk as well. And I want to be very clear about this, that I was very intentional of checking my hat as a coach before entering this retreat as well, to come in fully immersed as a student. And then having that conversation with myself as well of, do you know what? I've been leading myself. I've been leading my teams. I've been leading everything for so long. Try it on for size for a change, to set that aside. You're still part of a team here. There's still a role that you're going to play. It's not that you're going to be on the sidelines. And how refreshing that was, to be able to set the roles of responsibilities. Not that they were major over the weekend,
right?
But just those accountability pieces, doing those head counts was the primary one, you know, getting some messaging out. Man, that was nice to just be able to set that aside for 2 days. Could I have done it? Absolutely. So grateful that I didn't. To be more at ease, more present.
There's always something about always wanting to be the leader with the ego. I can resonate with that, but sometimes really just being the active contributor, because I think you can look at how this can go wrong in a man's career. If you're always wanting to be the leader, you could be in this job that is absolutely killing you, just so that you can be the leader. And this job may be something that doesn't serve you or serve your strengths or your passions, but you want this title, you want the image, and your ego wants you to own that. I remember always wanting to try and climb this ladder and climb, not realizing that once I really sat down with the people who were in the positions that I wanted, that they absolutely hated the job. I remember that was a huge epiphany for me. It was something that I was really looking forward to, and they had really painted it really well that this was this awesome position. But once I saw what was behind that curtain, every single person was unhappy, and the churn rate on that position that I wanted was so high, and the ego is what was driving me to climb that ladder. But it was definitely a ladder that was leaned up against the wrong wall, but my ego just didn't care. But I didn't know. But once I found out, that was when I made the quit. I was like, oh, well, then everything that I'm going for here is now false. And I don't want that anymore. Who was driving that? I'm so glad I didn't pursue that. But I'm trying to relate this powerful exercise into where men are today and what their ego is driving them to do to be in that position of leadership. I'm not saying don't be a leader, but maybe it's just not the right ladder to climb and your ego doesn't care.
Yeah. I'm sitting here grinning ear to ear as you shared that, because it was probably, I think, pretty damn close to 11 months ago that I fired you the email. I'm leaving my position with the wildfire service as of
I was like, wow, this
mid-November.
he's an action taker. He's quitting his career right now.
And I'm just grinning ear to ear because as you were talking, I'm like, ladder leaned up against the wrong wall, ladder leaned up against the wrong wall. It was like the recognition that I had hit in that leadership position that as far as I wanted to go. And looking up any further, it was like, things look really miserable up there. But my opportunity for growth is capped here. Because after leaving kind of that operational piece of being the leader of a wildfire base, after that, you get into the management and the politics. It's not fun. And that was the recognition for me that, hey, like a different calling as well, to continue to share this message out, to get a bigger presence, like recognizing I have a bigger impact to make. So multiple things there, but that's where it came down to, was like, I can see the next steps, but on this ladder, but it's leaned up against the wrong wall.
Yeah. And it takes climbing down the ladder that you worked so hard to climb up. In some cases, built, have to come down and then drag your ladder and find a different journey to climb and to pursue. But that can be scary because you're walking around with your ladder and it's like dark and you don't know if you just made a horrible mistake and you're losing your mind.
Yeah, man. It was like overnight slashed. I'm pretty sure up here we're the best paid wildland firefighters in North America. So it was like slashing my income, all of my benefits, pension, everything. Monetarily, it was like slashing all of that 85-90% overnight. And like you said, you're just walking around with your ladder.
Yeah, it's like you packed your bags and you're trying to find something, and it can be very daunting. But that, just relating that exercise of wanting this so bad, but then you saying like, I'm so glad I wasn't in that role. Like I didn't even really know what I was signing myself up for. I just knew that I wanted to be the leader. I just knew that I'm going to win this exercise to prove to myself being an active player can be where you can lead. You can lead your own life. You don't need the title.
Don't need the title. You'll still be MVP.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
We wrapped up with some exercises, with a meditation, doing some archetype work, essentially. Deep appreciation for the land that we were on, the cultural significance of it, of recognizing the moon and the stars and the ancestors.
When you bring up the ancestors, it's something I was journaling was imagine sitting down with all of your like if you were in this like huge circle and there was like a fire in the middle and you were with your ancestors and you're the only one that's alive and they're all kind of looking at you. I wonder if I am the strongest ancestor or if I am the strongest of the family. I just wonder, or if I'm absolutely like just the weakest version of my ancestors. I don't think so, but I just that question is interesting. Is are you the strongest of your lineage from just a like raw masculine like standpoint of like looking at all these people who've I believe it's 70 to 80,000 generations, I think, going back to when like humans
You just got the wheels turning on me. Like, how far back are we going here?
but you're having this appreciation for the land and
Yeah.
it seems like you're really enjoying this experience so far. Is there anything that's happened that you felt was not value add or
I think there's value in everything, Andrew, if you come and approach it from the lens of what am I learning? And I think that had I come into this wearing my coaching hat, I could have been overly critical. I would have wanted to do things differently, you name it. But I really worked again with the ego of really checking that at the door and then giving myself the space to look at the experience afterwards through that lens of what I learned. What can I take away from this? How can I become a better coach? If I were to run a live event, what are the pieces that I really appreciated about this? What did I learn from the other coaches, from the logistics? What would I improve upon to make a more powerful experience? That was probably one of the biggest pieces for me, was leaving that at the door, allowing the staff to do the coaching and be there fully embodying the student. I'm always doing my best to learn and always be a student. As a coach, I learn from the clients. The thing I was most chapped about was not having my journal to be able to write down the lessons learned in real time. But I think that was a really powerful part of the experience too, to just be immersed in it. Pull out those big pieces that really resonated, the ones that I needed. And I think, to tell you the truth, that was a big part, having that journal taken away from me. That was a big part in leaving the coach at the gate.
that's a huge point. I'll be honest, I struggled with that part quite a bit where I was critical and I would have to constantly remind myself to remain a student. That did color my experience. It was a constant battle. It was a constant journey for me, just even in my own life, to remain a student when I'm doing things, or allowing others who are in a position of leadership to allow them to just lead rather than me having to question their leadership and think that I have a better solution. But it's a constant journey of my ego. It is likely a wall I've created to not allow someone to add value to me, because I feel that who are they? And until I have that, then I'm not sure that I'm going to follow. The constant journey, even in my own relationships as well, is not always feeling like I have to lead or solve or be the one, and I have to save the day. I'm the hero, but that I can take a step back sometimes.
Yeah, and not trying to have all the answers as well. And I would challenge
Right.
any man, anybody in the audience that's listening to this. You know, we talked about this leadership example right here. I can guarantee that you were a leader in some aspect of your life, likely in your profession, right? And when somebody else comes in, either whether you've got somebody above you or you're kind of in competition with somebody to achieve that next promotion, that next leadership position, or you're changing jobs, you've changed roles, check yourself on how you've responded or reacted to having a new leader over top of you. If you're an entrepreneur, owner operator, have a small team. Look at how you observe your competition. Are you trying to build bridges? Are you trying to see what they're doing? Are you reaching out to them, trying to make those connections? Or are you criticizing the pieces that maybe they're doing that they're being successful with, but being overly critical about it and out of spite, out of ego, not doing those because you want to be different? There's something to learn from every single person. And I'll tell you that that was a huge piece in recognition as well, that in my group, a lot of the men, most of the men hadn't done very much men's work. Many of them hadn't done very much personal growth and development. So again, wanting to be that coach, wanting to bring that archetype in to help them further, to accelerate them, was very much there, wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the ability to surrender to that, surrender to being the student, surrender to being their colleague, their teammate. I was able to learn at a much deeper level something from each one of those men, just being present with them through the couple days, through the exercises, through listening to them, through empathizing, through talking to them, and seeing each other in very vulnerable states. So we crashed that night, 44 men under a single tent, no walls, getting bug bitten, no idea our watches were taken, no concept of time. We're all taking guesses at it. I think our most educated guess was we probably crashed around 1, 2 in the morning. And judging by what we knew was sunrise, we were up around 6:30. The next day was cold showers,
which was fun.
Yeah, it was actually jumping into the river, which was like, for me, man, coming down from -6 at the time was very nice and warm.
Yeah, I remember they made us do cold showers, and I had been practicing that already. And
yeah, exactly.
Once I started that, I had never stopped actually with cold showers, unless I'm like very sick, or like when I had COVID or something. But I remember that. I remember it was like this big thing for people. But again, that was my ego, because I was like, oh, I got this. Like, this is gonna be a walk, like just walk in, shower, and I just find it very refreshing.
Men, I live up in -40-degree weather during the winter, and I still take cold showers.
When I say I'm taking a cold shower, it's probably not what you're talking to. I'm out here in San Diego, and it will only get so cold. but hey, what am I? Well, my friend does have a cold plunge. It's like a refrigerator that's meant for dunking under, but it's only like 38 degrees, which is still very cold, but
yeah. Cool. Love it, man. So the big focus around day 2 was a healing exercise. Very common theme between pretty much all the men in my group, of holding on to pain from the lack of a solid father figure in their life.
That was very common at the event that I went to. It was almost as if, I would say 80% of people, the father would come up.
Yeah. Yeah, that was about the ratio for my group as well.
But it may have been because once a couple people do it, then it sort of just becomes the norm. It's like, okay, me too. Like, I have that too. Once everyone starts doing it, then other people go there. But I think most men have something going on there that is unresolved.
One of the big pieces that I had held on for so long to was a deeply rooted hatred, essentially, for my father. A lot of pain there from growing up, and didn't show up. Was very manipulative. But I remember working with one of the coaches in this program, with Brody. This was towards the tail end. I was making great progress in my life, in getting out there, taking action, living a much more intentional, disciplined life, getting more in tune with myself, sharing my truth. But there was still this one thing that was just causing anger and resentment for me to walk around with. That was the root of a lot of limiting beliefs. Brody walked me through a really beautiful, I look up to him this day as still a phenomenal mentor, constantly trying to learn from that guy. And he walked me through a really powerful meditation because I had put all of this pressure on myself thinking that I needed to forgive him. And Brody led me to see that I could surrender, that forgiveness is not. Like, just try it on. Maybe forgiveness is a piece of societal pressure that you don't have to. You don't need to necessarily forgive somebody. Change the script slightly. What can you be grateful for? What gifts did he give you? And so I went through that inner work right then and there and journaled on that heavily. And Andrew, I'll tell you that coming out of that meditation with Brody, and he asked me, what do you feel in your body right now? And it was an actual golf ball sized piece of tension that I wasn't even aware of in my body that had existed there for so long, just above my belly button, had released. And this was critical because coming into this healing exercise, that's where a lot of that anger, a lot of that resentment had left me. And coming into this healing exercise, we drew down on that. And even though that anger, that resentment wasn't there, there's still the residual effect. And this will resonate with a lot of men. This resonates with most men in the program, most men that I talk to, that limiting belief of not being enough. And they asked me in that practice where that was existing in me. And I actually found it right up here. It wasn't as significant. And as I mentioned, I do a lot of journaling. Like I can logicize my way through this, that I am enough. I know that I am. I know that I'm making progress on my journey, but that piece of the ego, I've kind of recognized that that'll always be there as well. To take that though, Andrew, in the presence of other men, for them to provide me the space to actually just allow it to come out vocally, physically, that primal, just inner power that I don't get out through my voice. Hence why my throat's rattled. To be able to just scream it out, to be able to feel that energy come up and through and out. And what a beautiful moment to be in such a vulnerable state and allow to have a group of men around you. Because I've got great male friends, man. But this is not a piece that I ever thought would exist there with them, that I don't see. Like, I mean, maybe that's the next level of connection to make for other men in my circle, to provide that space to just let it out. Like, we can talk about it, we can express our frustrations, but there's that piece of logical mind. You're talking to another guy there, another man. There's that logical piece that's always kind of in the way, but just allow that primal energy out and them to provide that space for you to do so, to restrain you, to provide that resistance for you to feel it physically as well as emotionally. And I'll tell you, that night, coming into Saturday night, very present, very in tune with my body, and seeing each of those other men go through. And there was one man that I connected with in my group, who he and I have been messaging back and forth. He's actually up in Alaska during the summertime. So I'm going to be going over for a road trip next year to visit him. And he and I just sitting that evening, and he asked me, he's like, how you feeling? And it was just that. It was like, I feel very, very present. And I don't think I realized the amount of tension I carry around in my body, not necessarily a bad tension, but just that action taker intensity that I bring about my life, that I don't give myself that space to gear down. Like, I tackle things very intensely, but it was just a very surreal, beautiful feeling that's still those residual effects, and starting to bring some of those practices back in, Andrew, that I experienced down there, to bring myself back in. Just getting new tools in the box because that post-retreat high wears off. It's like, okay, I need those little top-ups. What worked well for me there? Let's keep implementing those. Not that I'm going out and screaming in rage or anything like that on a daily right now, but those grounding
Maybe not on a
exercises.
daily, but maybe
No.
when you are on hikes, I mean, when you look at like animals in the kingdom, like they do make those noises, like, you know, it lets out the tension. It
Yeah.
is something that we as mammals, we do restrict ourselves in holding in that tension or holding in trauma or holding in that energy, which then can manifest itself into all sorts of physical and emotional ailments. It is rare for a man to be able to let out fully his energy, his voice, and to really own that those primal instincts.
You know, on the flight back, what I was ruminating on this because I know that this is part of something that you've said in the past that I've never followed through on. I've seen you write this before. I've seen it in the program. It's not something that I've ever gone out and actually executed on. And so I started asking myself, why is that? Why have I been told about this? Why do I know about this, but I've never done it? And it was that fear around anger, of how I saw anger as a child when I was younger. That anger equated to trauma, to pain, to violence. And so it's been a fear holding me back that would take me a step in the wrong direction.
Right, right.
And it's making that distinction now that no, this is okay. It doesn't mean that you direct that at somebody. And I don't believe, I know, and I would say that there is absolutely no space for that around the feminine. This is for yourself or around other men that can provide, that can absorb that energy. And this was one of the beautiful moments because the staff, I didn't know their stories. I didn't know their backgrounds. They were there, but I didn't know what journeys they've completed. I didn't know anything about them, what they've overcome. And in sharing that with them, the man sitting back, there's 5 of us, 2 of us are my size or bigger, right? So we're like cramped into the back seat here. And one of them shared, he's like, I went through something very similar that lines up a lot with work that I did years ago. And he said, you've got these good outlets, you know, I channel that into the gym, into productive things, maybe into working on some firewood, doing something physical. I'll journal about it, pop the lid off what's causing the anger there and understand. And he said, you're doing this all in your head right now. He said, he picked up on it. This is really, really powerful. He said, because I shared with him, I said, you know, I know in my head, I know in my ego that I'll never be enough will likely always exist. The voice will get smaller, but there'll always be those triggers for me. And he said, Pete, consider it the way that you're talking about it. You've got it trapped up in here, but actually feeling that and getting that out, he said, expand your mind a little bit. Consider it part of your nervous system. And that was that aha light bulb moment for me. To recognize that underlying fear that will be drawn down on for anything of not being enough is not just up here. It's part of that entire nervous system. And I've just gotten equipped with a very powerful tool.
How are you going to apply that moving forward?
I'm on the journey. So my plan is to continue with the practices that have been serving me very well. But being able to get in touch with that body, walk through those exact questions to identify whether it's building up in the body, whether I can visualize it, whether I can put a color to it, what shape it is, you name it. It's like, oh, okay, it's become something tangible. And I can put my hand on it where it is, wherever that might reside, whether that's up in the neck or throat, whether that's in the chest, whether that's in the gut, whether it's in the neck, in the head, wherever that is. I can actually, that's a tangible thing now. I can actually visualize it. And maybe that's the time to go and execute on that.
It sounds like a very positive experience you've had. What I noticed though is that the experience I think that you had was because of your mindset going into this and
Yeah.
your ability to find lessons. I would say for me, like I had my ego coming into play and questioning things. I felt that the program sort of just ended. I didn't feel that the men moving forward beyond having a good experience, I didn't feel that the tools were going to continue or that accountability or community was going to continue. I felt that it could have been so much more of a program that continued to add value post event. That was a cool experience, but what happens next? It sounds like you were able to put together lessons and things, but you're also a coach. You also
Yeah.
that I don't know that you talked about a lot of guys really done a lot of work just on the personal development side or men's work. So for that individual, he would likely just have had a good experience. I think you have a really good mindset in how you look at people and events and situations, which I think we can all learn from.
It's the last little piece, Andrew, and you're so right. That's this is when I had left the event, and then I was looking at it, reflecting on it, and I came to the exact same conclusion that this is just my assumption that likely about 10% of the men there have done a lot of inner work, will be able to take a similar approach that I did, pull out those action items and what to do with them moving forward, right? Document them, have them somewhere, a tool in the box like I just shared there, the grounding exercise that I'm working to call up on a daily basis, right? Some key pieces there. But I feel like 90% of them, where this was their first experience in this realm, sure, there was a little bit of vision setting. There wasn't any goal setting. And that's okay given such the short period of time. And this is what I always strive to do when I'm coaching the men in our program as well. What is the concrete action item? Like, you got to define that for me. When are you going to have it completed by? What does it look like? What are you going to integrate into your daily life? What are you going to eliminate? Give me a clear action. Give me a timeline. Give me the frequency, whatever that is. And who's going to hold you accountable to that? So looking at it from that critical lens now, if it was just brought up that I want you to write down 1 to 3 action items that you're going to take away from this, and I want you to share that with somebody that you connected with here, and you're going to hold each other accountable on that, that would have made a world of difference.
Right. And you guys had built a very powerful community. And for it to just end, it was like, whoa, you saw sides of men that perhaps even those closest to those men in their own personal lives haven't seen. And so for it to just end, it felt like it's a wasted opportunity on their part to really build something that is missing in men's lives, is that community aspect of men who will share their truth. So it looks like some of that was created. And so obviously that's why I like our program.
Yeah.
We have an ongoing community. We have some really awesome men in our program. You mentioned Brody. Brody is in the program as well as a coach. If you can just summarize that experience, how would you summarize it as we conclude here?
That I reached a new level of vulnerability during that experience as well. Thinking back to day one, that intention to gain a deeper emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. That spiritual connection came to the other men through connection, and through connection to the land, and the deeper appreciation that I have for it. And it's so fascinating, man. That one is so, so fascinating. I've worked forestry. I continue to work forestry. It's always been under the surface, but I've always said that I've done that because I didn't like an office job and I wanted to be outdoors. There's something deeper connected there. And I saw that this weekend, and it all made a lot more sense. Everything that I've done for my professional work, everything when I feel that calling to get out in nature, and it's one thing to be in it, but I feel that coming out of this weekend, I can feel it more.
That is the big takeaway for you too, is the feeling of it versus the logicizing of it, which is not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for paraphrasing that for me. Rather than being like, oh, I'm doing it for the fresh air, for the humbleness of the trees, for, the physical activity, blah, 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 blah. I could list off a million reasons why I love being out there. But I think now it's more just about being out there.
Hmm. I think that's the spot right there. For those listening who are interested in the work that we do with men, you can visit kfmcoach.com, where we offer coaching, community, and accountability. There's over 300 plus clients there, and we have a team of really awesome coaches, including Coach Peter here, and as well as we mentioned Brody as well. All right. Sounds like an awesome trip. And I think we'll put the cut there.
Awesome, man.